Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. This time I wanted to have another one of my little discussion videos that talks a little bit about some of my story in the hobby and where I think it's going to be going. But I wanted to touch up a little bit on why I even got into the hobby. Now this was focused on more over a year ago in a three-part series of my history into comic book collecting. You could check those videos out for a more in-depth uh, look at my history in collecting. But in order to see, have a better view of my future in this hobby, which something that I've been thinking about over the last couple months, I need to revisit some things in the past and how I even got into it. And no, my entry into comic book collecting did not start with the very first comic book I bought back in June of 1989. It didn't start there. Okay? It didn't start until about a year later when the second season of the HBO Tales from the Crypt series started. Now, I had watched the first season, which was about 6 episodes. It started right around the time the Batman movie came out in '89, June '89. And I was really pumped up for the second season because HBO was really advertising it, really marketing it, that all these stars, these movie stars, were going to be in this TV show. And they were really pumping up that Demi Moore was going to be on, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and so many other people. Eventually, years later, Tom Hanks would show up, and others on this TV series that everyone seemed to be so into. So I was naturally pumped up for it, and I loved watching every minute of it. And that's what really got me into the hobby. That's what made me look for Tales from the Crypt comic books, and I found the reprints. And I loved every bit of them. I would get the Gladstone reprints, and then I got the Russ Cochran black and white hardcover complete sets. So I read, or at least I was familiar with all those stories. Now, once again, flash forward a few years to 1993. I started getting into superheroes because before that I wasn't into superheroes. Like I said, I was just into EC. What got me into superheroes, X-Men in particular, was the X-Men animated series. I was watching a video not long ago on YouTube. I forget it was by who. It wasn't anybody in the community, I don't think. But what was the original Marvel Cinematic Universe? In this video it argues that it was those original animated series like X-Men and Spider-Man and Fantastic Four and all that. And they really had a good thing going with those cartoons. They were really well done. They took adaptations right from the comic and they changed it up a little bit and put it on the small screen. And I thought it was great for somebody that was just getting into, the hobby, getting into superheroes and seeing these characters. I would have loved to have seen what we see today back then. I was dreaming that I would have seen an X-Men movie or a Spider-Man movie back then in the early 90s, but we had the animated series, we had the cards, and we had the comics, so it was really, really a fun time to be a fan. Now, you say what you want about the 90s and all that stuff, all the bad that came with it, and I agree, but it was those TV series. I think which really, starting with the animated series, Batman the Animated Series, which really brought a darker, more, something that closely resembled the comic books in the animated world. And I think X-Men did the same thing, and they had a lot of great episodes, a lot of episodes that made you think, and a lot of episodes that were based off of the comic books, the original material, original source material. So, but the odd thing is, but at least back then, when I first started getting into superheroes, I was always interested in when these heroes first appeared, their first appearances. I was interested to see how the other heroes met these characters and how they interacted with others. Those were the things that really interest me. So yes, like me, like probably a lot of you out there, were really into or are into first appearances. And some may say, there's always a critic of that. There are always critics out there about that, but there are critics about everything. Everyone's always criticizing somebody about something. What you look like, who do you vote for, what you like, what interests you. So I just take it with a grain of salt. I've said this before, I collect comic books for me not for anyone else. And I would assume those of you out there that are watching do the same thing. So you collect what you like, whether it's first appearances or sets, variants, runs, whatever you want to call it. You collect what makes you happy and what you think is best for your collection. So, but that's what I started, and I really liked the first appearances and all that stuff, and it's continued with me to this very day. But that was really my beginnings. And I must admit, some of the early superhero books, when I went back and looked for their first appearances, whether they were in reprint form, which was mostly reprint form back then because I couldn't afford to get anything big. I must say, though, in comparison, after reading the superhero stories on how the X-Men first met Banshee or the first met Sauron or whatever it was, I was a little disappointed in some of those stories because I didn't think they were particularly well told after coming off of reading all those EC stories. Now, I know some people out there might say, what's the big deal with EC? What's the big deal with these pre-code horror? Well, really nothing. There is no big deal about them. To some people. To others, it is a big deal. It's to each his own, right? Some of us really, I know the pre-code horror, EC's in there and all that stuff may not be as popular, with the regular comic book fan because, I can understand that. You see the movies, you see the superheroes, it's done very well on TV and and on the big screen. It draws you in. And they're heroic, who doesn't want to be Spider-Man or Batman or Superman or whatever? Not too many people want to be the Crypt Keeper. You know what I mean? Except for me. That would be. I think that would be cool. But you want to find something you could really relate to in some characters, and a lot of those pre-code horrors are just not something that people really want to or can really relate to. So I think that adds to it. But for those that are really into them, they really seek them out, and they really are a tremendously big deal. And that's where I was coming from. It was really something big for me. But like I said, I eventually learned to appreciate, and that's one of the good things about the hobby. You learn to appreciate things that are different with experience and with other things. And as I started to be more exposed to superhero books like the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and others, I learned to appreciate them more and really see the value, not the monetary value, but the value in the stories and in the characters. And EC started to, fade away a bit for several years. After that, some may say, you've been a collector ever since 90, 93, whatever it was. And this year, and years before this, I really got quite a few big books, like The Amazing Fantasy and so forth, in various conditions, of course, in various affordable conditions for me. But some may say, well, why didn't you get those back then? Well, I left the hobby for a while, and the reason why I left the hobby for a while is because life happens, right? You move out of your parents' home, and you're now tasked with coming up with rent, paying for taxes, for food, and all these other things. You may get into relationships with people. So, and all those other things, schooling, job, career. So all these other things sort of take precedent in your life because they have to. They have to. And then comic books sort of maybe are on the peripheral, or just put out of your life, or video games are put out of your life for a little while. But you still love it. You still want to go back to it. And that's something I've always said over the years, that I wanted to get back into it, and just waiting and waiting and waiting. And I finally did several years ago. And ever since then, it's been one hell of a ride. I've been able to get the books that I've always wanted to get. I've been able to upgrade the books that I always wanted to upgrade, and there's still plenty to do. There's still plenty to upgrade. And there will be several upgrades as I foresee into my future, which brings me to where I think I'm going in this hobby with the future. Now, maybe some of you feel the same way. The reason why I'm doing this video is because this was something that I've been pondering for a while, and I've even discussed it with some people. My future in comics. And I'm going to be quite honest. I managed to get some pretty big titles, okay? Like I said, albeit in different conditions and so forth. Conditions that best suit my budget, because I still have real life responsibilities of a family and all these other things. So I got to buy what's best for me for now. And what happens tomorrow happens tomorrow. Sometimes you just don't know. But ever since I've gotten the Amazing Fantasy 15, I feel like I reached some sort of, I don't want to say peak, but I feel like I've achieved a lot of my goals when it comes to comic book collecting. Now, that does not mean that I'm done with collecting. It doesn't mean that for a long shot. I already have my top 10 or 15 books that I would like to collect next year and have an idea of what books I'd like to get in 2020. But I think that my tastes are changing to where I only want to get a certain amount because like what Patrick has been doing, he's been culling his collection. That is just something I wish I could do with a lot of my things, a lot of my books. I have several long boxes here of decent books, nothing crazy, nothing overly valuable, but then I have a nice collection of pretty good ones that I like to keep in my PC. But it's like I just want to get rid of a lot of stuff and just maintain and keep a very select few from my collection. And that's where I see my future going, and maybe that's where some of you see your future is headed in this hobby. Collecting the ones that you really want to hold on to, the ones that you want to improve, upgrade. There's several upgrades I'd like to do. Several books that that are going to be big, that are in the future, but you got to slowly pace yourself until you get to them. That's where I see it. Instead of just buying I haven't been like that in a while, but just buying everything you get your hands on, it's just, to me, it's no longer meaningful like that. When I first came back to the hobby, I was like, I was trying to get as much as I could. Not necessarily because I wanted to have a large quantity of books, but I was like, oh, I want this first appearance, or that, this, or that, and this. And after a while, it started to become a little meaningless because I'm like, why do I have this? Or I forgot I have this. So I try to become a little more picky with my collecting in many different ways. Condition, the actual book, and so forth. And I found that is a very pleasurable and enjoyable experience. And that's where I see my future going in this hobby. It's sort of like a calmness that I've reached. I don't have the urge to go out and buy everything and that fire burning within. I've achieved a lot of goals, and I know I'll achieve some more, but it's at a really peaceful pace right now, and it feels good. It's been that way for a little while for me. It's just recently I've been thinking about it, and I thought I'd put it into a video form. But that's what I see. That was a little bit of my past, a condensed version of my past for those that don't want to watch the three my comic book collecting year 1, year 2, year 3 videos. Perfectly understandable, because they are a bit long. But it's where I see my futures going, and it's definitely a good place, definitely a good present and a good future. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for taking the time out to watch my videos, and let me know what you think about your hobbies in this hobby, where you see yourself going, where are you at, and so forth. I'd be very interested to read that in the comments section. Take care, everyone.